I've been quite deliberate about not recapping all of the sessions because all of them are available on YouTube. So just search for the platform Nigeria. All of the sessions you've heard today are available for you to download, catch up on all the conversations, very interesting comments online as well. And you too can be part of the conversations by posting online using the hashtags the platform NG and the platform 36. It's very important. Remember, Bishop Kuka's books are also available in the foyer out there on your way out. But please just hold on as we get prepared for the panel discussion that's going to be moderated by Mr. Gbolahan Joshua. So without further ado, let me just welcome Mr. Gbolahan Joshua.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to our speakers, Professor Soludo, Governor of Anambra State. He said the last time he was at the platform was 5 years ago. The last time I moderated at the platform was 5 years ago when he was here. So I think he has to come more so that Pastor Koji will get me to moderate. So I'll be calling on our panelists in no particular order. His Excellency, the Governor of Anambra State. His Excellency, the former Governor of Lagos State. Excellency, former Speaker of the House of Assembly, in any order. And Bishop Matthew Kuka.
Thank you. Hi, how are you doing? How are you doing?
Okay, afternoon, sir. So while you were speaking, I was communicating with a lot of people online and asking them the questions they want to hear you answer. And so the first question will be for you, Honorable Dogara. And the question is this. When Professor Soludo was speaking, he said that the expectations of the populace are very high. And people said the expectations are high because of what the politicians told them when they were campaigning. And that in the Federal House and Senate, there are almost 470 members. Those 470 members are from 8 parties, even though it is dominated by the APC and the PDP. But that when it was time for them to collect cars, nobody refused the cars. We did not know that anybody was from a different political party. And when they were asked, why are you taking these cars? They said it is the laws that have been passed. So as a former member of that house, can you tell Nigerians, is there something that happens when people get elected that they all behave the same way?
Well, I don't know if my mic is on. Can you hear me?
Is the mic still on? Mine is on, yeah.
Okay. It's like mine is not on. The mic. Well, in answering this question, I think it's important first to state that I'm no longer in the House of Representatives.
That's a good...
Convenient. That's a good alibi.
But I cannot deny the fact that that is my primary constituency, having served there for 16 unbroken years and having led the House. As a matter of fact, you know, when you are campaigning as a politician, virtually everyone operates by the level of light that is available to him. And sometimes there are projections, there are things you are looking at. It is only when you get to the office, that you now realize that some of those things that you thought were possible are not possible. And in respect to the cars, I would say that it depends on the choices a particular set of members will make. The process of being in the House, I was chairman of House Services twice. I think the first to hold that position twice. And I remember sitting like this in an executive session with all the 360 members to take a decision as to what we must do. At that time, Innoson was not there, but Peugeot cars were available. But members had preferences for some other brands. And we sat there together with the leadership of the House. Then I wasn't the speaker to decide that no, we must buy Peugeot cars for honorable members of the House of Representatives. And so some didn't like it, but the speaker then agreed. And if you check it in that house, it was Peugeot that we bought for honorable members of the House of Representatives. During my time as Speaker as well, we were exploring the possibility of patronizing Innoson Motors. But that time, I think they hadn't advanced to the level they have attained as of today. And I sat also as Speaker and said, if I could convince the House to take my decision to patronize Peugeot when I was House Services Chairman, then there's no way I can now go for Camry or some other exotic models. We must buy Peugeot. And the reason was simply to give impetus to the fact that we must not only patronize made in Nigeria goods, we should take pride in what we produce, and that we should sustain the livelihood of the Nigerian workers. Because by patronizing them, they were able to do a lot of things, upgrade even their plants, and then employ more people. But why I said to give that alibi, the alibi I first gave that I'm no longer in the House, is to say that I don't know the motivation behind the decision of the present set of honorable members to go for the vehicles they went for. But I will say, as leaders and representatives of the people, if I had better understanding as to what led them to take that decision, I'll be in a position to now offer an informed opinion about it. But I don't want to make a value judgment, having not listened to them, having not followed the debate about the kind of cars, the kind of choices they made, and whether people, could actually reject it or not. So that is my take on this.
Thank you. Next question will be for former Governor Fashola. When you were in Lagos State, you had a very commendable record. You went to the federal, and you were a super minister. Now, a lot of people think the bedrock of democracy starts with the electoral system. And there were a lot of complaints at the last election. If you were made the chairman of INEC against 2027, what reforms will you bring to the electoral system?
First of all, I don't want to be chairman of INEC. I've had cause to work with some INEC chairmen from, I think, Maurice Iwu, Jega, and Mahmoud at some arm's length relationship, but I don't envy their work. And I think perhaps the closest to our election is also our football. So we all know who the best player is, we know who should play what, and when they don't perform, then sack the coach. But I agree that electoral reforms and, are helpful for the sustenance of our democracy, but how well have we even optimized the reforms that have taken place? Is it a chairman, and this speaks to all of the other issues, the elite consensus, the citizens' advocacy, citizen responsibility that we have? Because I keep telling people that the INEC that we condemn here is a knight in shining armor in other democracies across the continent, helping them, consulting for them. And so when we attack the systems, I think we should just look in the mirror. The work that INEC does, because I have been involved in not a few elections, is a logistics nightmare. So they need a lot of, and if you don't mind me spending a minute or two on this, people must understand it. The people who carry out election work on election day, it's a logistic nightmare. And INEC doesn't have all of the staff. So some of the staff are ad hoc staff, trained a few weeks before, and even on election day, people can fall ill, vehicles can break down, and that translates to some of us at our polling stations on D-Day as delayed materials, delayed arrival. But that is a logistic of delivery materials to 197,000 polling stations, if I remember the number, or 176,000 polling stations. If I remember that number correctly, who can do that job without error? And that is why the principles of election is not necessarily, it's ideal to get it right, but at the end of the day, it's substantial compliance. And I think an education, a mutual understanding of what the rule is, what the objective is, will help bring down the temperature, even if I agree that there should be reforms.
Yeah. Next question will be for Governor Soludo. During your presentation, you said Nigeria, with statistics, is a poor country. Now, the last 6 months, if you speak to a lot of people, there's a mantra you hear, Ebing Pami. Ebing Pami. People are saying they are hungry. Labor is asking for a new minimum wage. People are saying if you increase the wages, the public sector might struggle, the private sector might struggle, inflation might go up. What is your take on this new minimum wage?
I don't know who sent you. I don't know. Whoever sent you, tell them you didn't see me. Comment on minimum wage, and as a sitting governor, that's like going to roast corn on a petrol station. You know, because what are you going to say? I've said it in my lecture here. I did say, at a personal level, I won't comment deeply on that. There are deep conversations that need to have, which we missed the opportunity to have, which will probably someday we'll get to it. You know, discussion about minimum wage is a very emotional thing. The worker is saying, my wage can't take me home. And there's enumerates what he needs. Nobody is talking about productivity. Nobody is talking about ability to pay. Nobody is, and part of it, as I said during my presentation here, is the lifestyle, the impression that we gave from the public this thing that all is well. They see those convoys of 30, 40, 50, can you tell him you cannot pay this much? Then they say, wait a minute. No, if a member of National Assembly can go home with this, why not? So, and we have all these parallels. I said, sometime I wish that we'll pay everybody minimum of 1 million. Okay? 2 million, 5 million even. I wish. But the reality is, you bring the numbers and put it on the table. I just said, at the best of estimates I can get, unless something changes tomorrow, federal government's actual revenue will probably not exceed 17 trillion this year. If you share it to all Nigerians, it comes to 6,160 naira per person per month. That's what it comes out per capita. If you take even the total 28.7 trillion and share, it will come down to 10,000 naira per person per month. I'm talking about per capita. If I take my state, I've told you, if you share every revenue that we got, it comes down to less than 2,500 per person. Now, but this money belongs to all Nigerians. That's what you need to provide infrastructure, fix schools, fix states, fix that, and so on and so forth. So there is that general conversation that we're going to have. We're not talking about benchmarks or to the rest of the world and where we are and so on and so forth. Even where in the world they all have minimum wage annualized that is more than 30% of the per capita income. It's talking about carrying capacity. So this conversation is a very deep one, but not one that I want to get into, but I just want to make 2 quick points about it. First, we must make distinction between a national minimum wage and discussions about civil service minimum wage. Because there was a confusion as if the discussion was a negotiation between government and labor. No, as Governor Fashola mentioned, MSMEs, I think you mentioned that statistics, employs about, I think, 49 point something million. That's what I had. They are the largest employers. And I will leave you with this thought. I was talking with a farmer speaker. He's a former speaker. And I asked him whether he can pay, and what we were gisting there. I will give him a microphone to say it, what he told me. Whether he can pay, what he can pay in his own farm. I spoke to 9 small, medium enterprises in my state. 9. And the response by these 9 is interesting. None of them knew that the conversation was about them. None of them. In fact, one of them said, let them pay it now, let them. I said, no. What is being discussed is what you will pay. Say, no, not us. Okay? I'll tell you the conversation, 2 of them in particular. One happened to be a proprietress of a private school, and she has 26 staff. The gardeners, the cleaners, the gateman, the driver, the this, and so on. And I said to her, so how are you going to cope with this? He said, no, it doesn't pertain to us. I said, no, that once it becomes law, that's what you must pay. And you know her response? He says, in that case, they can come and close the school. Or, he said, do I know how much she pays the head teacher of her school? They are talking 60. He said, in that case, if she raises the school fees enough to be able to pay that all the children will run away. That's one. The second one happened to be one guy that produces some of this bottled water. And he has 33 staff. And you know, minimum wage applies once you employ up to a certain number, 25 or so, 10 or thereabout, 10 or 25 or whatever. It's mandatory you will be prosecuted if you don't. So I said to the guy about him, he said, no, it's not for them, it's government. When I tried to convince him that it's also about him, what he's going to pay, his response was very interesting. He says, now, after buying diesel at the cost he's buying, that he's actually thinking of laying off some of the workers that they margin, because there is a limit to which he can increase prices. So the only thing he will do is to lay off some. He said, well, if they come and force me, then I close this place. Now, it's important that we understand that we are discussing the minimum. Minimum which everybody will have to pay. The churches, the schools, the roadside bakery, the farmers who employ a certain number, everybody. Those SMEs that employ the 49-point-something million, they must pay this. That's what it is about. Once we understand it, no problem. That's the point. It's a very important thing that we understand, because we're not discussing civil service minimum salary. Because they make it as if it is government versus us. Government versus, it's not government. Put it what it is, and then if I receive what I got in a month, I put it on the table, then you got to ask, how many staff can I pay? I have just recruited additional 8,115 teachers. For comparison, the Labour Party in the UK is proposing that if it wins the next election, it will recruit additional 6,400 and something teachers for the entire UK. In Anambra, in 2 years, I have recruited 8,115, and I have to pay them. So, the minimum wage thing, it goes, everybody is right. Everybody is right. The worker is right to say, what am I getting? Nobody is asking, what does the worker do? We're not asking that question yet. All we're saying is, how much does he need? He's right. And for me, even if you pay 1 million, 10 million, it's not enough. Fair enough. But on the other hand, you have to come back to reality. That we're talking about this MSMEs, the school, private schools, churches, so on and so forth. You have to pay your own driver that way. You have to pay your this and so on and so forth. We're all in it. Whatever they agree. We'll muddle through, so to speak. But maybe after 1 year, we will meet to discuss the consequences. The only challenge often is that, now talking about the consequences, I remind ourselves, in 1973, there was the famous Udoji Award. Udoji Award. Salaries were doubled. Yeah, workers and so on. The oil boom thing, what do we do with money? We double salaries. A few months after that, the average worker, about a year later, the average worker felt that he was better off before the boom. And so, I pity the president, because it will all be on his head. If the consequences come down, whatever it is, if whatever is negotiated is unsustainable or unpayable or whatever, months to come, who will bear the responsibility? Not me, not me. So, months later, it will still come back. It is Tinubu, since he did this one didn't. Just like we're talking about this removal of subsidy. I think as I was discussing with you before we started, the subsidy was actually removed by the previous administration. It was removed by the previous administration because by their 2023 budget, they said they couldn't go beyond June. So by the law passed by the National Assembly, they had legislated that subsidy was going to end by June 2023 because we had reached the end. You couldn't go much further. But then this president comes, just at the beginning of it, the thing, bah, I said, Tinubu, you remove subsidy. Anyway, so the consequence will still come back. If there is any, if it's dislocational, everybody will still go back to the president. But I think we can all get to the room and dialogue and discuss how this thing can be fixed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I think with these few words of yours, you've been able to convince the audience that when this minimum wage is reviewed, even their domestic staff, their drivers, they should be ready to pay too. Thank you.
That's the point.
Okay, next question will be for you, Bishop Kukah. When former Governor Fashola was speaking, he said every country subsidizes a few things. You know, some countries subsidize agric, Nigeria was subsidizing petroleum products. But we have a peculiar case. There is no country where the richest set of people are in that sector that things are being subsidized. When you go to the UK, you don't find the richest people where they pay dole. In America, you don't find the richest people working where the subsidies are happening. Why do you think we have this peculiar issue?
Well, I haven't run a government, so we should have asked Fashola this question. But I think, you know, fundamental to this conversation is that we are confusing a symptom with a disease. The bigger disease for me is that I do not see that there is enough intellectual input in public policy. Now, you can't, I remember I was listening to, I had a conversation, I listened to Yoweri Museveni when he gave a talk at NIPS, and he said something that caught my attention. He said, look, as the president of Uganda, I have the population of my citizens, it's before me. He said jokingly, he said, my wife is over 6 feet tall. I have an idea about the amount of cloth that every Ugandan woman needs to tie in order to maintain a certain level of dignity. I also have an idea about the amount of ugali, which is like gari for us, that the average Ugandan needs to eat in order to go to sleep peacefully. In my view, I have not seen evidence that those who govern Nigeria are thinking about what should be, I mean, how many Nigerians can sleep peacefully with a meal? Because if you're thinking through all of this, and we're talking about minimum wage now, nobody is talking about 90% of the ordinary people of Nigeria who are not earning any wages. So when Labour starts some of this conversation and they do all this rigmarole with federal government, I'm like, hello, what about the farmers? What about all the people in the villages? Governor Fashola's friend, Hernando de Soto, you invited him to learn. Hernando de Soto, he wrote a book. The title of the book is The Mystery of Capital. Why does why capitalism works in the West and why it fails elsewhere? And it was a study of, I think, about 4 countries or so. They were miserably poor. But his argument was that, if I still understand, it's a long time since I read the book. But his argument was, look, how does it happen that what my father, you are not among, the fathers of some of us who are poor here, all of you, you know, this looks like a senator, all these rosy children. You know, the question was, he said, how does it happen that what the poor have in quantum, that is land? If you go, my father can tell you, he's dead now, but we can say our land is from here past the airport. And he said, that is what ordinary people have in plenty. But land is fundamental to economics. So he says, why is it that this massive land that an illiterate farmer has can't do anything for him? Yet, a governor says 100 by 50 feet, they give you a piece of paper which you can take to the bank, and they call it collateral, and you can get money. Yet, my father's massive land cannot get me collateral. It seems to me that fundamental to this conversation is our inability to deal very sincerely and very seriously with the issues of who we are and where we are. I think you made a very, very sound point. I think it was you. That, you know, they say in traffic, you can't be driving and drinking at the same time. But somebody mischievously say, the reason is you may spill your drink. But it is difficult to be governing and thinking at the same time. And there are so many people who have gotten themselves into government purely and simply by accident and by the size of their pocket. Not because they have sat down to think about what they will do. So a system of this nature cannot deliver anything other than the contradictions we are facing in Nigeria every day. Because we can have this conversation. You can offer workers 1 million. 2 years down the line, we are still back to the same problem. So the point you made, which I thought was very important, can this government, or any government for that matter, say, look, we have a small committee of 5, 10 people. They're not politicians. They're bureaucrats, tested people. You are just out there. Help me think through what to do to resolve this issue of labor. You have a few people who are not in government. They are not party people. They don't chop belly full. So they are not in this, for the sake of money. Help us think through how do we educate our children. I come from, you look at what is happening in northern Nigeria. The sea of humanity that is joining the traffic. Yes, we are talking of 10, 15 people, Almajiris and so on. Today's Almajiri is going to go, tomorrow is going to be 20, going to be 30, then end up in the National Assembly or whatever the case may be. There needs to be an aggregate of, whether you call them think tanks, but I think this government must take very seriously, beyond politics and the politicians, people that are helping government to conceptualize and refine policy for the good of the ordinary people of Nigeria. Because I think that we will come back to the table to have this conversation. And we've had it over and over. And what Professor Soludo is saying is quite frightening to me. But how do we are sounding and painting this kind of picture. Yet the French are saying that more champagne is consumed in Nigeria than in anywhere else in the world. I'm seeing all these cowboys who are building all kinds of structures that you can't find in New York, you can't find in London. The Nigerian elite continues to drink the blood of the poor. Let me put it that way. Because it is from inside this rotten country that we are still stealing the money we are sending our children abroad to study. So resolving this problem requires more than just this endless circle of elections. And then finally, we must come back to the whole question of the National Assembly. How do we explain? We may not be in a dictatorship, but there has to be some legislation against certain levels of malfeasance that are not acceptable by any standards at all. The humongous amounts of, I remember our senator in Kaduna, Senator Shehu Sani, he said, okay, every month they are giving us 25 million. I have to take. Okay, I have to take because it's already there. To change any of this, you have to go back to the National Assembly. And I'm sorry to say publicly, but I've had people in very high places who say to me, the only way we can change this thing is through a military coup. But there must be a way out. Because the members of the National Assembly, we need to love them. They are our representatives. But what you're saying, former Speaker, can it not be, does it need legislation to say that nobody should, because they kind of, all these Land Cruisers, where they are produced, they are not buying them as much as, I think these people must be wondering what kind of human beings are in Nigeria. Isn't it possible to legislate what you are saying? Even if Innocent Motors cannot produce this number of motors, isn't it possible for Nigeria to decide that we are going to realign our pattern of consumption? Otherwise, I mean, we can be dancing around these problems and going around in cycle. But my concern is, whether you remove subsidy, can we have subsidy against hunger? And, I don't know but because for me, the problems are huge. And there are no quick answers. But we need to get around this problem because the pain, the suffering of ordinary Nigerians is immeasurable. And we are not going to, now we are hearing that I saw a tin of needle is 61 or whatever thousand naira. You are not going to solve this problem by just throwing money at people. Because Obasanjo threw 10 billion. I remember Jega and others were members of that committee to alleviate poverty. The program started. The cowboys decided to take the money. My wife, my children, my nephews, my nieces, and people distributed the money among themselves. So I don't know, but I'm just saying that there is nothing happening to us in Nigeria that is new. We cannot restore this confidence. If you bring Mamsa, with what am I going to use to sing, the national anthem? Or what am I going to use to feel so patriotic about Nigeria? These are the critical issues. They are mutually reinforcing, but I think that with a little bit of thinking and tinkering with the system, politicians can have policy options because there are good stories in other parts of the world where things have happened differently. And like I said, we can go back to Singapore. But Lee Kuan Yew has demonstrated, other leaders have also demonstrated. It's not so much what you know, but where are you asking for help? Okay, we are only 200 and something million Nigeria. And yet we are not seeing the kind of things we are seeing. We are not seeing the anger in India. We are not seeing the anger in China. Only 30, 40 years ago, when you look at China, you just see people with funny bicycles and so on and so forth. Suddenly, how did China manage to make this jump? We may not be imitating, but there is no substitute for eating what you can produce. And this discipline among our leaders, I want to commend you for the examples you've given. But again, not every governor came back from the central bank. Because the other advantage you have is that if you already have a bit of education and you have a good job before becoming governor, then it becomes easy. I will end. There was a cartoon in Daily Times many years ago. It was election time. And the cartoon showed two people. One was miserably hungry. The other one was quite, with a big tummy. So the voter was looking. And he said, if I vote for this man, when is he going to chop belly full before he remembers me? And then he looks at this man. If I vote for this man who is used to eating, will he remember me at all? So these are the distortions that are in our system. Thank you.
This issue, my sympathy lies with the Nigerian world. That is why even as Speaker, I was a die-hard advocate of not just minimum wage, but living wage. Because my belief then is that it's the workers that process our national wealth. And if their take-home cannot take them home, they'll be tempted to cut corners in order to get home. Okay, they were tempted to cut corners in order to get home. So I believe that our workers should be paid living wage. And of course, that will come in sync with the submission of Bishop Kuka, who talked about the experience in Singapore, where the base were attracted into the public service. We pay very well. Chances are that we're going to have some of our best brains working in the public service. But I must sound a note of caution, which was what I was discussing with him. And then he said, okay, if, for instance, an amount is approved, am I in the position to pay my workers at the farm? And I told him, for me, it's very simple. Like the value proposition that we talked about here. I will simply call the workers to a meeting and say, okay, this is the value you are putting on the table. Because you need to put the value on the table first before you can now claim value. So we will have a rational conversation. This is what you're doing. This is the profit you're generating. Tell me how much you want to take from here. And if I cannot afford it, then we'll close down the farm. It's as simple as that, because I can't pay what I do not have.
Your farmer,
I can't give
workers
what
to
I
invest
don't
in the
have.
farm.
And that takes me to an experience I had as speaker. There was this strike by one of the big associations in Nigeria, and I was saddled with the responsibility of mediating. So I had to call the minister to a meeting to say, okay, let's meet with the leaders of this association that had gone on strike. And that strike had lasted for months. So when we met as a trained negotiator, I told the minister, okay, please, I want you to be very sincere with us. What resources do you have? After listening to all of them, what resources do you have in the ministry? Bring even all the budget documents. And so he came with the budget documents, the money is available to him, and we put it on the table in order to reach a ZOPA. That's a zone of possible agreement with the workers who are on strike. And we now said, okay, we have listened to all the demands, we've listened to everything that you want, but this is what is on the table. Just help us. Do the allocations yourself. Fund these ones that must be funded. They are necessaries by the ministry. And then from the available money, take what you think you can take from it. And the minister was very sincere. So they started looking at themselves. And one was like, we didn't know that the situation is like this. And at the end of the day, we were able to agree on something. Even though it didn't meet the demand they had placed on the table, they took it. So we can extend this discussion to the present challenge that we have. Government should be sincere with workers. Let them bring the value that we have on the table. And let them talk about things that we must fund. It talks about infrastructure, we're talking about growing the economy, we're talking about so many things that will be done. As a matter of fact, we can even allow the labor leaders do the allocation. I'm for that. Take whatever it is that you think we can pay to the workers and what you want us to devote for roads, for power, for agriculture that we're about to talk about now, and the rest. And I believe we will have that solution if we ever hold that kind of conversation. About agriculture, I think is not a rocket science. It's a very simple thing.
And to me, this is an area that doesn't even require electricity or all those other factors of production that we talk about. Take, for instance, if we want to bring revolution in agriculture, just the oil palm industry, just for instance. Malaysia was nowhere. They came here, took the palm oil seeds from Nigeria, and now they have planted 600 million palm trees, and they're the leading producer of palm oil in the world. Assuming you raise just 3 million families from the belt that produces palm trees, and say, okay, each of these families, government will empower to just cultivate 1 hectare or plant 1 hectare of palm oil trees. You know how many million trees that would be? From the middle belt, south-south, southeast, southwest, just 3 million families. And let each of these families be empowered just to plant 1 hectare of palm trees. How many trees would that be if you do the maths? And then it is proven that 1 hectare can generate from the red oil to palm kernel and everything between 15 to 18 million naira per annum. So you can imagine moving 3 million families, just lifting them out of poverty by this simple method of empowerment. Let me talk about this ranching or no ranching that we're talking about. By the year 2030, for instance, you can Google this or query your search engines. The beef market, just beef, not talking about pork and others, beef market only, the global share of the market is going to grow to $1.3 trillion. And as we speak, Nigeria is nowhere in the chain. Take, for instance, just dairy and its associated products, milk, cheese, and others. By 2030, just that dairy market, the global market size, will be $1.2 trillion. And we're not doing anything about it. We're not preparing ourselves to inch into the market or capture, no matter how small, the size of that market. So we're talking about stopping banning open grazing, for instance. But what alternative are we offering? The people who have accepted this as their culture, who have lived over time practicing this, what do we want them to embrace? And I can tell you a very simple thing. If we can't follow the example of the palm trees that I talked about, look at families, millions of families, let's assume even if it is 1 million family. I don't even know the population of cattle in Nigeria. And say, okay, government is going to empower them to have the right kind of breed of cattle that generates beef. And then the right type of breed that gives milk. Do you know that by the time we transition from these traditional cows that we have to the ones that will really give us value, we have automatically killed open grazing because you can't even graze those cows. That will solve the problem. And in Nigeria, you don't have to even reinvent MAMSA. Once people perceive that a particular business venture is lucrative, they will just go into it. Like in those days, any community you go to, you find out new filling stations because people believe then that once you have a filling station, you will have money. Automatically, anybody who gets money was going into filling station. So when the cow Fulanis now see that I will have more beef if I rear this cattle, I will have more milk if I rear this particular breed of cattle, you will see that you don't have to preach to them. They will abandon these traditional cows that don't give us the meat we need, don't give us the milk we need, and embrace, the new breeds. So to me, these are some of the commonsensical things that we can do in agriculture in order to bring revolution in that field, change the destiny of people, pull millions of people out of poverty. Thank you.
Question. Either former Governor Fashola or Governor Soludo can take it, because you both have experience in that matter. One of the things people have complained about is that when governors leave office and there's a corruption probe, one of the areas it always starts from is the security vote. Do you think the security vote should also now be subject to audit, openness, transparency? And do you think that security should be handled, should it still be the preserve of the federal government, or should it be divulged to the state?
Okay. First, again, I didn't operate a security vote. Lagos State did not have one when I was chief of staff or when I was governor. All our procurements were done through the office of the Ministry of Economic Planning and Budget. So if we wanted to buy vehicles, we wanted to buy this, we wanted to buy that, they had to issue what was called an authority to incur expenditure. And if it exceeded a certain threshold, it must come to council, debated and approved. So I can't speak about. So when I see these security votes, I don't understand it. Yes, so I never experienced it, I didn't go through it. So what I went through was that process, and that's what we kept. Now, in terms of whether security is not a preserve of the federal government, and I think that we mix up these issues. So I published a monograph called Nigerian Public Discourse, and I discussed this item as well as the current labor issue in it. And I'm going to speak to them very quickly because we're pressed for time. Yes, if you read the Constitution, it says that security shall be the responsibility, welfare and security shall be the responsibility of government. But as a student of statutory interpretation and practitioner, the government used there is a government with small g. And lawyers will tell you that that means it is all government. So security is not typified. Now, what is in the exclusive list is the control by the federal government of coercion instruments, the police, the army, and control of weapons. But security is more than, if security was simply the number of soldiers we can deploy, the number of guns we can deploy, and all of that, all of us should be safe by now. So it is more than that. It is a whole of society conduct. And you will see that, I think in Section 24, under the duty of citizens, citizens also have a role to play in supporting and assisting law enforcement agency to carry out their understanding. But that's a three ties for a big debate. The quick point I want to make about wages, and this might disappoint a lot of people or even cause some more discomfort, but I hope it will enrich the conversation, and I hope it will help government come to a solution that works, is that there's a distinction between salary and wages. They are not the same thing. And oftentimes we use them interchangeably. I discussed it in my book, I think from pages 88. And if you do a search, you will see a lot of literature on the distinction between wages and salaries. Salaries are paid monthly. Wages are paid for blue-collar workers who work on factory floor per hour. So what we are doing is a salary review, not a wage review. And therefore, we are going to end up getting the wrong answers. Interestingly, what our Constitution provides for is a wage review. It doesn't provide for a salary review. There's another mechanism that deals with that. And I've said sometime next week when I have some time, I'm going to do a treatise on it. So the problem, therefore, is not setting the minimum salary, because that's what we are setting. In other countries, once they set minimum wage, it's lock, stock, and barrel. Everybody pays so much per hour. So what the farmer can then do is say, look, You are not going to work 8 hours anymore. I need you to work 3 hours, and I'm going to pay the minimum wage. When you finish, go. So instead of 8 hours, you get more money for working for less hours, and you can do 3, 4 jobs to make up the time. Okay? But what we are doing here, we are setting a monthly minimum salary. Unlike the setting of the minimum wage, it doesn't affect salary workers in that sense. But once you raise the minimum wage, now that's where the governors are saying we're having problems. Once you raise to 30, or from 30 to 60, it means that everybody above that must go right to the top, right to permanent secretary. And that's where the problem really lies. So in our rush to put some money in the hands of the most vulnerable, which is important, let us understand that we probably have to decouple this thing in a more holistic way and set, so that the people who are running businesses who are likely to be affected can say, look, we are going to pay minimum wage. So if you use the calculation for minimum wage as it is, what you will get is that our minimum wage actually is not 30,000 naira. That's not it, because if you want to get the minimum wage, it has to be done per hour. So you will divide the total annual amount by 52 and then divide by 40. If you do that, you will see that the minimum wage is currently about 173 naira per hour. So there's work to be done, and it speaks to bringing intellectual rigor and understanding to this. I've made this point, so this is not the first time I'm taking the point, but I couldn't carry my colleagues in cabinet when I raised this point, that what we're doing is not the right thing. And the process for passing the law must involve some of these considerations when it goes to Parliament. Thank you.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, so I'll just leave 1 minute. Governor Soludo, your parting shots. Bishop Machikuka, your parting shots. Just 1 minute, please. My parting shots. Governor Soludo first.
Thank you very much. There's no parting shot, only to tell Nigerians, happy Democracy Day. And let us get into this and get to work. A lot of work to be done. A lot of passing buck. As you point one finger, we have a saying in my language, when you are pointing one finger, look closely. The other ones are pointing at you. So my message to Nigerians is, we're all in this together. There is no better. This is likely to be the biggest, in my view, the largest, most powerful black nation on earth. But for us to build it, will require all of us on it. But the leaders must come clean. We must come clean with the people, put it on the table, and let's have an honest conversation. Just like he said, my first meeting on this wage thing, I raised this question. Are we discussing minimum wage or minimum salary? Of course, it looked to be moving up people's head and so on. So you just let it be, because the minimum salary thing is not taking us anywhere. And but back again to our federal system. Just like was made, I won't forget to put this footnote on our elections, I said. My own analysis is that our electoral system, with all the complaints and whatever, seems to still be getting better and stronger each regime. But we need to go back to a federal structure. We copied this from America. Independent National Electoral Commission should conduct federal elections, and state organs should conduct state elections. This will be part of the movement towards true federal structure. It cannot be from Abuja to be organizing election into so House of Assembly somewhere. We need to grow our institutions, let them mature, make our mistakes, learn from the mistakes, and let them evolve over time. Otherwise, we will be afraid of death and continue to commit suicide. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
I think there's an American political scientist who talked about what he called manufactured consent. My problem, Prof, with this issue of state Electoral Commission, because I served as a member of the Always panel, is that they are literally at the table of the governor. And that is why when it comes to these local government elections, you may find when a governor is generous, he can give the opposition one local government. And I think Nigerians have massively agitated for the end of state electoral commission. I'm sure that you have enough imagination and experience to think about something more creative. But state electoral commissions are dangerous for our democracy in this present shape. The second point is I would like to recommend, and I hope that Shiwaju, the President, is listening to us, that, and I think you all will agree with me, that Fashola should be the national chairman of the Wages and Salaries Commission. Finally, you know, we have said nothing about security. We can't go back to farms. I think that I appeal to the federal government to find the means, wherever necessary, to give this nation between now and the end of the year. We want to see a total and absolute end to banditry, to insecurity, and we must reclaim our country from the clutches of these criminals who belong to a different world, not the world that we know. And for those of you whose pastors told you in January, the beginning of the year, that by the grace of God you will sing a new song, now learn the new national anthem.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.